In 1961, John Corcoran graduated from college. By 1979, he had taught high school students for 17 years. In the early 1980s, he developed over $50 million in real estate. But in 1987, he learned how to read. He was appointed to the board of the National Institute for Literacy by Presidents Bush and Clinton. Of course, that's after he became an advocate for literacy. John is now the founder and president of a literacy nonprofit, the John Corcoran Foundation. He's appeared on many national shows such as 2020 and Larry King and Oprah.
One of the things that I like about am I okay? Oh, I can walk around. Okay. All right, I'm going to walk around a little bit. One of the things I like about the interview with Oprah was that last question and the last answer that I got about filling a hole in my soul. And I never was asked that question, and I never gave that answer. And I don't know where it came from. It didn't come from me. It came from the prayers that I said in the morning about getting the right words out there. And today we're going to be talking about literacy and reading, but think about language processing, including the oral language. And about 25% of the population learns to read like birds learn to fly. And they just walk by the library and they get it. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, where I dwelled and my fellow travelers dwelled, we have difficulty learning to read. And about 50 years ago, we started calling little boys and little girls, labeling them learning disabled. And it's stuck. And I think, personally, it's about time for us to change that word and quit referring to little boys and little girls as learning disabled, because we are able to learn. And as my story tells you, that I was able to learn a lot of things, but I had difficulty learning to read. So when somebody asks me if I have a learning disability, I have recently been telling them, I don't think I have a learning disability. I can learn a lot of things. I had difficulty with reading the printed page, but I did learn to read at the age of 48. And the key to teaching little boys and little girls like me to read is proper instruction. And proper instruction comes from properly trained teachers, and properly trained teachers come from universities that properly prepare those teachers. And it's not to blame or point the finger at anybody, but it's the reality. It's my perception of the problem. And if I learned to read at 48, I should have been able to learn at 8. But I bought into the big lie that something was wrong with my brain. And most adults believe something's wrong with our brains. And that's a burden. That's tough to go to the learning table. It's tough for teachers, and it's tough for the learner. I got to get off the preaching here, because my family and the director of the program tells they want to hear the story. You've got to tell the story. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story. But I do believe that if we teach our children to read, we are going to fill a big hole in America's soul. And we are not going to, and I think most of the people in this room, I can assume, are interested in improving the quality of education. Without blaming, pointing fingers, we really do. And teachers really do want to teach little boys and little girls to read. And they can't do that if they don't know how to do that. So we have to focus on training them. And we're looking at the universities to do that job. And again, I'm always protective. I always want to close those comments with saying, I'm not pointing a finger. I'm just saying these are some of the things that I think we need to do. And I actually think it's time for us to quit calling other human beings learning disabled. We could be more specific and in our language. And that's my wife. She's still with me, 48 years. And I know what she's going to tell me. Get to the story. No?
I was going to say, explain why disable is not pleasing you.
Oh, you? Okay. I will do that. And I've been guarded. I've been quiet about this for a long time. I said it's time for us to start thinking about the toxic term itself. And this means not able to learn. It's just that simple. Webster tells that, and it carries it's the shame and the blame. We just mislabeled it. We chose it 40 years ago because it was better than what we were saying about those little boys and little girls that couldn't read or couldn't get it. But we have the science now to close the gap. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Now tell the story.
Now tell the story. Okay. I want to, and I have a short period of time to talk to you about 40 years of my life, and also my perception of things, my perceptions, and how I see things. And I saw things from and it used the word enable in there. And some people said my wife enabled me, or the university enabled me. Nobody enabled me. I was surviving. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't believe anybody could teach me to read. I always gave up. I gave up on myself. When I was a boy, I had a mother and father that were both literate. I had 5 sisters, and I came from a loving home. For the first 6 years of my life, I was told I was a winner. It wasn't until I went off to school like most children, and I call this sub-personality Johnny the Innocent, because all children are innocent. And sometimes people will say, why didn't you ask for help? Little boys and little girls do not have to ask adults for help. The adults have the responsibility to impart in the skills and values that we need to be productive in school and in our life as citizens and in the community. So the little boy is innocent. He skipped off to school like a lot of children will be going off to school this year to learn to read and write. I didn't get it. By the time I was in the 2nd grade, I was in the dumb row. Obviously, the teacher didn't talk to my parents about me being a winner because I was in the dumb row. I was a loser by the time I was 8 years old. I just walked into a hostile environment. The dominant language in the school place, in the schoolhouse, is the written word. And for the first 3 years of our lives, we're taught to read.
In the first 3 years
of our education. So it is a oral language processing issue. Sometimes, and that's why she travels with me, to fill in those holes. I have no problem with that. No problem at all. Where was I now? You took me off track.
33 years of it.
Yeah, first we go to school for the first 3 years of our schooling, and then the rest of our lives in our academic.
Wait a minute, what do you do in the first 3 years?
We learn to read. And then after the 3rd grade, we read to learn. And that's the way it is for the rest of our lives, in the workplace and in the school place. I didn't get it. And I was passed on. We've been socially promoting people. And by the way, I don't think this is just a story about a boy that went to school in elementary school in the 50s. It's about children today in our school. And I was asked today, have things changed? Do we know a lot more? Yeah, we know a lot more. But we aren't doing much to close that gap. We know a lot. But what we have to do now is close the gap between what we know and what we do, and we're not doing it. And again, that's analytical. That's not critical. I'm in the third and fourth grade now. I'm in the fifth grade. I'm passed on. I can't read. I move forward, and now I'm acting out my anger, my frustration, my confusion. I'm a little boy. I'm telling this story in retrospect. I didn't know what was going on, but I knew I was a second-class citizen in that environment, and I couldn't keep up with my fellow students, and I knew little boys and little girls know, and I couldn't please my teachers. No matter how much I wanted to please them, I could not please them. And I would rather, when called on, I would rather turn over my chair and disrupt the class. I dreaded being called on to read. And why would that teacher call on me to read when she knew she never heard me read before? So I developed an attitude. And I think by the fifth grade, schools, I thought, gave up on me, and I gave up on them. And I gave up on myself in terms of learning to read. And I was a terror. I was expelled. I was suspended. I spit on a teacher. My parents were called to school, just like they were when I was in the third grade, second grade. And the teachers told them that this is a smart boy. He behaves. He's polite. He has math skills. He knows his timetables. He'll get it. And now I'm in the fifth grade, and now the teachers are saying, hey, something's wrong with this boy. He's out of control. And so now, but nobody talked about my reading problem in the fifth and sixth grade. Nobody talked about it. What do you think they were talking about? Behavior problems. And this is the same phenomena we can see in our schools right now. Who's misbehaving? And sometimes they say little boys with learning disabilities and little girls with learning disabilities have emotional problems, and I say, and act crazy. And I say, if you teach us how to read and you give us an equal opportunity in the classroom, we won't be so crazy, and we won't be so disruptive. And anyway, I got tired of taking the short end of the stick. I got tired of seeing my mother cry and my parents go to school and me embarrassing them. I was loved by my parents. All of my life I was loved by my parents. And it was the core value of that love. I didn't know it, but I can tell you now, that's how I survived. I really bought into something they told me, that I was a winner. But all the signs and all the messages were about me being a loser. And so I got to the 8th grade. I had some athletic skills. I had some social skills. But I got to high school and I just said, I'm going to change. I'm going underground with this. And I never did try to cheat in elementary. They just passed me on. I think in the 5th grade, there was only one 5th grade teacher, and I think she passed me on because if she didn't pass me on, I'd be in her class again. And she didn't want that, and I don't think I wanted that either. I'm in high school, and I'm playing athletics, and I'm ineligible all the time because of my behavior. And I started, in high school, I started cheating. And, well, grades too. But what I was going to say to deal with the academic piece of it, I just started cheating. And I developed, when you're in high school, it's fairly easy to cheat. And this is part of the problem in me telling this part of the story. I still don't like this part of the story. Telling my sins and crimes publicly, but that's what I started to do. And I had borrowed homework, and I dated the valedictorian. I hung around with college prep kids. I listened to their oral language. I tried to talk like them, or I kept my mouth shut. That's another good way to sort of hide your illiteracy, I guess. And I passed as a literate, and I was Also the captain and all-league athlete. I got an athletic scholarship. I graduated from high school. Millions and millions of boys and girls that couldn't read their diplomas graduated from high school. In those days, that was a place for us to go. There was a job for us to get. We could go to the farm, we could go to the factories. But today, this is why the problem is worse today, is because you've got to have those basic reading and writing skills, those literacy skills to be competitive in the workplace. So the problem is worse. It's not better. We are smarter, but we haven't implemented it yet. We haven't been able to do that. And it's not because we don't want to. We just don't do it. I mean, it's just like watching Washington, you know. We probably want to do some things, but we just don't get them done. I get an athletic scholarship to go to a Division I school. I can't read. I got this scholarship. I got this opportunity. I really bought into the idea that my parents told me and teachers told me, and I still believe it. Education is the key, is the passport to success and a good life. I bought that. So yeah, I'm going to college. I've got a scholarship to go to college, an athletic scholarship. And maybe that prayer that I said many, many times, and I can remember a prayer that I said when I was 8 years old. And I was laying in my bed and I said, please God, tomorrow, when the teacher calls on me to read, let the words come out. And I actually got out of bed and turned on the light and opened the book to see if I got one of those zapper miracles, you know. I got that. I got a miracle worker when I was 48 years old with a volunteer tutor. But it took me a long time. We'll go back to me going to college. How did I get through college? How could I possibly get? It gets a little bit more complicated now. You can empathize with the child that is passed through, an angry, confused teenager, a little empathy. Just gets a little, the moral dilemmas are building right now. Wait until we talk about me being a teacher. That's really a moral dilemma. It makes people in the audience nervous, and it makes me nervous about telling that story and explaining that to. Why would I graduate from college and not know how to write a sentence and end up in the education system? California certified teacher, 17 years of success in the classroom. How did that all happen? Why would I get out of the lion's cage and after graduation and go right back into it? Because I wanted to fix it. I thought maybe I could fix it, just like everybody in this room. In some way, our agenda is to fix it, to make it better. A little confusing for someone who couldn't read to do this, but those were some of my thoughts. And maybe they were subconscious, and maybe they were super subconscious, and maybe I'm only able to articulate those right now. I know why I'm here today, for that same reason, for us. And I tell this story over and over again so I can help maybe open the door for the works that you do, in whatever way you do it, to move the mountain. And we can move that. And again, getting off from preaching, right? I got to get back to college. My college experience, I got to tell you a couple experiences about cheating. Now I'm, what do they call it? Aggressive cheater. You know, really proactive in it, big time. And I think on Oprah it talked about me passing a exam book out the window. Dr. Gregory's 4 questions in government, and I was a scribe. I could count. I had penmanship skills, and I could copy words. You know, it's like if I put a Chinese newspaper in front of you right now and I say copy it, you could copy it, but you wouldn't know what it said. I could do that. Dr. Gregory gave 4 essay questions and I had to have this course. I registered with government 5 times. And I had to drop it because I couldn't find a teacher that could accommodate me. And finally, I just had to do something kind of desperate. Yes?
What accommodated you? Tell them what teachers you tried to get. people who didn't give essay tests.
Oh yeah, I also was a member of fraternity, and there were files there of old files. We had professors that did the. I know there's college professors in here, but you know they were kind of like they had 3 years of exams, and they just did that cycle. You just find out what the cycle is, and you got all the copies, and that was an easy one. That was easy. Passing it out of the, and also having students, my friends, exchange papers and write a short statement on the questions. And I also, what I'm going to tell you about is I also stole a test. And one time so that's the aggressive behavior. And one time did I wrap up the other piece? Help me out.
Okay, you're talking about why you
Passed the test.
yeah.
Oh, okay, let me finish that story. I passed the test book out the window. I copied the questions out. I passed it out. And somebody have asked me, don't laugh at me, I have a language processing problem. I was asked me, why would a friend do that? A friend took it and sat under the tree and did the essay. He was a brilliant guy. I was an athlete. He was a brilliant guy. He had a little edge about defying the establishment. You know, this was sport. This was sport for college kids. And he didn't really know I didn't know how to read. He just thought I was lazy and didn't study. So he was able to answer those 4 questions when I passed it out to him. And when I'm sitting inside, it's 2 hours, there's proctors walking around, and I'm sweating bullets because I got to get that back in. And I'm praying. And you're not supposed to pray when you're cheating and lying. Okay? But I was praying that he knew the answers, and I was praying that he was going to be able to get it back in. And one of the other strategies, there's a whole bunch of strategies, and I don't have time to tell you, but just drop one. You always sit in the back of the room behind the older people because they'll rat on you. You sit among your peers, and they're kind of in on it also, or at least they close their mouth or their eyes and allow you to do your thing. Did I get that whole story in? No, I didn't. I'll tell you why he did it. He was really a shy guy. And he wanted to go to the spring formal in the fraternity house. And he wanted to go with this girl named Judy. And he talked about her all the time. I said, all you have to do is ask her. Well, this was my opportunity. I said, you help me with Dr. Gregory, I'll help you with Judy. And I passed Dr. Gregory's quarter and final exam with his help, his assistance, and he went to the spring formal with Judy. And those were the kinds of things that you do when you're young, when you're 18, 19 years old. It's not really that hard to understand how these things could happen. One night, to kick it up a little bit, one night I went over to see a professor. He had been talking about, you know how the professors talk about your final exams, and they're looking at the exam and they're saying, you need to study this, you need to study that. I knew he had the test. And so I went over to visit him one night. It was about midnight, 1 o'clock, and he wasn't there. So I opened his window and I went inside. And I looked around for that test that I knew that was there. Because he carried it. He had it in his briefcase. It must be in his office somewhere. And I couldn't find it. And so I visited him the next night, and the next night, 2 or 3 nights. And it's getting closer to exam time. And he's still flashing this thing during the daytime that it's there. I know, he's got it. He's got it. I got to find it. So I talked to, a lot of this is planning. And sometimes when I tell these stories, people say, why didn't you? Yes?
You didn't tell him about the fire.
I haven't got there yet. I was going to tell them that story. Okay. Come on up here and help me. We've been married 48 years, so it's fun. And it's really important that she fills this in for me. And at home, I fill in a lot of her stuff that she gets wrong. But it's not public, you know. I knew there was a file in the office and it was locked and it had to be there. That was what I deducted, that it was there. So I got about 3 of my buddies, and I said, we went over to his office, and we carried a 4-drawer file cabinet out of his office at night, and we put it in the back of a car and drove it over to the college. I lived in the athletic dorm, so we had to go to one of the apartments there. I'd already done my pre-planning, and I called 3 locksmiths and knew that they would be available during the night. I got quotes from them, and now you got to remember, these guys were, they weren't in on this. This was like Tom Sawyer. Was it Tom Sawyer that got his buddies to pay him to paint the white fence? That's more of what it was. And these are the same guys, and I wasn't with him on this, but these are the same guys that put a Volkswagen on the 2nd floor of the girls' dorm. You know, this is what college students did. So it's not that complicated to see that you could put a crew together to do some things. And they were just going to go and have whatever John's going to do, we don't know. Make the story short, I got the locksmith out there. We cleaned up the apartment. And I put my suit and tie on. This is like 2 o'clock in the morning. Locksmith comes out and unlocks it, makes the key for me, and gives me the key. And I got the test. It was in there. And so we carried the file cabinet back, and remember, I got the key, so I've got a future with this professor too. This is not going to be the only class I'm going to take for this. So we get back. And get it back, I go back to the dorm, the athletic dorm. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, the sun's coming up, and it's like Mission Impossible. You know that? Remember that one? You guys, some of you are too young for it, I'm sure, but it was, you know, I was really feeling clever and a lot of adrenaline, and it pulled it off. This is really something. And you know how bold that is, to go take a file cabinet out of somebody? Apparently I didn't know how bold it was. But I did do that, and then I got up in my bed in the dorm and laid down, and I just started weeping like a baby, weeping, because that's not who I wanted to be. I didn't want to be a criminal, a thief, a liar, a cheat. That's not who my parents thought I was. That would be traumatic for my parents, for me to be caught. And so that story is not about how clever or bold. It's about the desperation. And my crimes and my aggravation was within the education system. And it was not outside. I didn't get in trouble with the law. I only challenged the institution. And like so many of my fellow travelers that challenge the outside law, and my brothers and sisters that are locked up, they're incarcerated. We have 60% of the people that are locked up in our prisons read at the elementary level. I didn't go there. I didn't have to go there. How's our time? It's time for me to do it? Okay. I want to, I can't tell you the whole story, and boy, I'm glad I don't have to tell you about being a teacher. But part of it, the being a teacher, where's my reading? I'm going to, I have about 15 minutes left, and I have a reading here, something that I put together. I actually like to write better than I like to read now. I never thought I would ever learn to write and spell a few words too. But reading is easier than writing. But the nice thing about writing, you can edit it, you know. And I always got in a lot of trouble by just having an oral language. And I would say things I wish I could pull back. And sometimes my wife would ask me, say something, she'd say, "You said that." And I said, that was just air coming out. That's blowing away. That was a free thought. That wasn't anything you should quote, you know. But when you write something, you better get it right. because it comes back to you. So I want to do two things. I'm reading this because I wrote it and because I can read it. And I'm going to read it, and I know that I'm supposed to read it and pretend like I'm not reading it and look at you and act like I'm talking like those guys do on TV, you know. I wish I had one of those things the president has, you know, so you look like I'm talking to you. I got to keep my eyes on some of these little critters, so if I don't look up and make contact with you, it's not because I don't know better, it's just I'm going to put my priorities where I have to put my priorities now, okay? And that might be an overstatement. I may be able to look up and see you once in a while here. I'm going to read some thoughts that I have written to you for about 10 minutes so I can make sure I am tying up all the loose knots. This is a prayer that I say at the beginning of most presentations. I'm doing it a little different, but it's the gift of God dialogue. And dialogue unties knots, opens doors, resolves conflicts, makes persons greater. It is the bond of unity and the mother of brotherhood. Make us understand that dialogue is neither an argument nor a battle of ideas, but a search for the truth between two or more people. Make us understand that we need each other and that we complement each other. We have something to give and a need to receive. I can see what others cannot, and they can see what I cannot. There are a lot of us who have learned how to read as adults, who now like to write poetry. It is probably not because we see ourselves as poets. It's probably because poetry doesn't require complete sentences or punctuation. I would like to share a few verses with you that I have written. Some of you may think I am old, but in my mind I don't think I am old. When it comes to reading, I am bold, or so I have been told, and perhaps I am bold because I know more people need to be told. In America today, it is as important to teach an adult how to read as it is to teach a child how to read. Not teaching a child or an adult to read is without justification. It is time to change some of the myths that perpetuate illiteracy. Myths like adults had their chance to learn how to read when they were children, or they did not take advantage of their opportunity, or children did not try hard enough, or they were lazy, or they just didn't care, and they were labeled learning disabled. We got the blame. We got the blame, and we got the shame. Teaching a child to read is as important as teaching an adult how to read. Not more or less. We must prevent and eradicate adult illiteracy by teaching children and adults how to read. Children and adults need to be able to read to have equal opportunity to succeed in the classroom and in the workplace. The most important educational, civil rights, and human rights issue of this decade is for all individuals of all ages is to have the opportunity to learn to read. The harm of neglecting to teach a child to read continues into adulthood, and it has a horrendous impact on individuals and our great nation. Many adults are left suspended in their childhood in various ways and degrees, academically, intellectually, spiritually, psychologically, and emotionally. Not being able to do what a second or third grader can do is read the printed word. Street smarts and an observing eye may get you by, but inside we know most of it is a lie. Without a full deck, I played a good game, but in the game of life, I always felt lame. You need a full deck to play your very best. Reading the printed page is your best bet to pass the test. No matter how smart or clever a person may be, including John Corcoran, in America today, no individual can maximize his full or her full potential without developing basic literacy skills, the fundamentals of learning, community, and building community. I did not learn to read as a lad at 8. I learned to read as a man of 48. And I have to say, that was great. But don't you think a man who learned at 48 could have, should have learned at 8? That would have really, really been great. As I mentioned, for the first 6 years of my life, I was told by my parents that I was a winner. Like millions of other innocent children, I was sent off to school with high hopes of learning how to read. However, I was one of millions of children and adults that have difficulty learning how to read. In the 2nd grade, I ended up in the dumb row in school. I was a loser by the time I was 8 years old. The term dumb stuck with me until after I learned to read. When a person feels oppressed, I believe that human spirit at some point, in some way, will fight back and will try to resist their real or perceived oppressors. I rebelled overtly, passively, and sometimes aggressively. I disrupted my own education and other people's education. It is no surprise to me to know that 50 to 60% of my brothers and sisters who are incarcerated read at the elementary level or below. Literacy skills can help level the playing field that produces equal opportunity for all in the classroom and in the workplace. Literacy skills change lives. It saves lives. We must close the gap between what we know and what we do. We must fuel the political, social will with a sense of urgency that will cause change. Urgency, urgency, urgency. We can't wait. I will always be grateful to the Adult Literacy Initiative, my volunteer tutor, Eleanor Condon, my master teacher, Pat Lindemood, the Carlsbad Public Library Adult Learning Center, and the San Diego Council on Literacy for helping me take my first steps to learning how to read, and supporting and encouraging my literacy efforts and activities over the years. Again, I am very pleased to be here with all of you, and I thank you for your willingness to learn more about illiteracy in America. No one ever caught me as an illiterate. I told my story. I chose to tell my story. And I'm telling the story of little boys and little girls that are in our schools today. The fear of embarrassment or criticism paled in comparison to the idea that I might be able to shed some light on the issue of illiteracy in hopes that a child in my position might not ever suffer as I did, or that an adult would have to have the courage to walk into a tutoring center no matter what his or her age is. I want to ask you a special favor today. I want to ask you to be courageous and bold in speaking out about literacy. Now that you have learned more about the issue. As humans, we have all experienced triumphs and trials, pain and hurt. But it is our spirit, our faith, that gives us hope. And it is that hope that gives us courage. We cannot always wait for the confidence of self-assurance to be the motivating factor to take action. We will never connect all the dots. We do not fully understand why some people have difficulty learning how to read and write, but we know they can learn with proper instruction. I would like to humbly ask you to step up to the plate and begin advocating for literacy. The bottom line is, when we teach an adult to read, we are impacting the generations to come and investing in the future. There is no one in America today who is completely satisfied with where we are right now, because we have the stats and the numbers which show that there are still millions lacking necessary literacy skills to maximize their full highest potential. My intention has never been to blame anyone. My intention is to offer hope. That it's never too late to learn. My parents told me I was a winner. But when we go into hostile environments and we are told something else, we become confused. But I always kept my childhood faith and love that my parents had for me. In the world of education, we don't often get to talk about love. Be assured that teaching a child or an adult to read is an act of love. I love you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, John. That was absolutely inspiring. Could you share one story while you were a teacher? And also, would you mind the book there, his book? Can we hold that up? The Teacher Who Couldn't Read. Is that Kathy's copy, or did you all bring any books?
Yeah, we brought a few books.
Oh, good. All right. He has a book with two books, actually. All right.
Okay,
one story.
Okay, one story. One short one, Kath. One of the things that I did, I talked to you about, I created an environment, and I had probably more guest speakers come in, expert guest speakers to do the lecturing, you know. That was a little tool that I had. I had a battery of tools, and I showed a lot of tape, like I taped roots, and which was pretty dynamic. Have you seen that classic? And I was in a multicultural community, and I didn't have any row. I never had any rows in my classroom. I always had circles, and we sat and we talked and we discussed and we debated. And I was pretty bold and progressive. That's how I got by with some of it, because there weren't any other teachers that had, you know, the minority students having a discussion about what they saw on roots. And so that kind of gave me a pass. But I'll tell you, I was always on guard. And why didn't I get caught? I was always on guard. And sometimes when I got evaluated, my students were really covered for me. I mean, they really were involved in what we were doing, you know, and just a battery of things like that. But I'll tell you one story. And the story is, I was always fearful of faculty meetings, and most of you teachers all know what a faculty meeting is. You're just fearful, or you have some feelings about faculty meetings, and you don't want to go there. And when I was teaching, the principal was actually the boss, you know, and there's a principal back there. You're not the boss now, we used to do brainstorming sometimes, and I dreaded those brainstorming situations, because the principal would say he's leading the brainstorming, and then he'd call on somebody, let's put these ideas down. And there were a few podiums in the room, and I always tried to, you know, I'm 6'4", you can't hide behind a podium, you can't dare come in late. At least that's one thing I could always do right, is to be early. But I can remember I was always prepared, and if he ever really said to me, thank God for all the women in the room, because they were the first choice of the principal. But I was afraid that he was going to say, John, get up here and write this stuff down. And I was always prepared for that, because if he ever did that, I would stand up. I'd take maybe 1 or 2 steps. I'd grab my chest, drop to the floor, and I'd say, call 911. I wasn't going to be taken alive. Let's do it that way. And most of that, you know, there's a lot of other stories. Read it in the book. There's some details there, you know. And I got to say, I also would like to take this opportunity to, as the moral dilemma of being a teacher, that's the part that's the hardest thing to deal with. And that I owe the literate society an apology for my behavior. I was an adult, and I did something that I shouldn't have done. And here I am sounding like a hypocrite, because I do not want anybody that can't read and write in the classroom now. And there I was. And so it gets a little bit more confusing there. But I was a pretty good teacher. because I really did care and I worked, but I couldn't give my students what they really, really needed, and that was literacy. And I regret that, but I also apologize, and I take responsibility for it. I also want to make a quick footnote about the university that I went to. It was not the athletic department that had anything to do with my corruption. They didn't know what I was doing. It was me. I have to take the responsibility for that. And I had, at the university, I had an opportunity, because I was an athlete, to get a tutor. But the tutors were co-eds. And there was no way was I going to let a co-ed know that I was reading at the 2nd grade level. So I couldn't access that research. And that's what adults, we get caught up in this thing, this way. And even as a teacher, there's no way I could allow any employer to know what my deficiencies were, you know. But thank you again. Short answer to a long question.